edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports entertainment all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. We are kicking off the podcast with the NFL's Week 4 action in a segment that we call Show Me the Money Lines, where we take a look at some of the weekend's NFL money lines and give you our betting picks. We begin with an early contest as the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Detroit Lions. Kansas City a minus 290 favorite. The Lions available at plus 245 odds. Taylor, can the Chiefs hand the Lions their first loss of the year, or will Detroit do just that to KC?
Yeah, I'm not going to bet against the Chiefs until they give me a reason to. So far, they haven't. The Lions, it's cool that they're undefeated. They tied the Cardinals in a game they absolutely should have won. They beat a slow-starting Charger team, and they beat an Eagles team that could easily be 0-3. So I'm not overly impressed to this point. It's good that they're where they are, but I think they're in for a dose of reality this week. Patrick Mahomes has thrown for like 1,200 yards with 10 touchdowns in 3 games without an interception. He's unfair. The Lions can always rise up and shock the world, but like I said, I'm not going to bet against the Chiefs until they give me a reason to do that.
Yeah, that's a good philosophy to have there. Detroit has surprised many people, many pundits and fans and bettors, because they were underdogs the last 2 games they had, and I think they were close to even against Arizona in week 1. So it's not like anybody's out there saying, oh, Detroit's a good team, give Detroit respect. Then they got to play arguably the second best team in the NFL this weekend. Even though it's at home, they don't match up well with the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think they're going to be able to slow down that offense. And I don't think they're going to be able to score as many points. I'm curious to see how much they open up the offense against an average at best Chiefs defense. Like, I think Detroit has some weapons to put up some points. But come on now. They're not going to score 35, 40 points with the Chiefs. You got to go Kansas City here.
Yeah, I'm going to take KC also. Mahomes, by the way, now a member of the 99 overall club with Madden in Madden 2020. That may even seem like he might be, I know that they don't do 100 overall players. They may have done that once with someone in the mid-2000s. But, he's outstanding. Detroit is, maybe overachieving is a good word for them. But Kansas City is doing exactly what we expected. The Chiefs are one of the best teams in the NFL. KC should pick up the win. So we're all going to pick the Chiefs for this one. Next up, the disappointing Cleveland Browns face the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore a minus 300 favorite compared to Cleveland's plus 250 underdog status. Rick, you weren't a believer in either of these teams heading into the season. So who do you think gets the win here as they go head-to-head?
I love this whole drama they got going on about Baker Mayfield being overrated. Personally, I do think he's overrated. He hasn't proven anything as of now in the NFL. Rex Ryan's criticism of him on Monday was phenomenal. I even found it hysterical that Baker Mayfield had some comments back for Rex Ryan. But look at this. They got killed in week 1 versus the Titans, who are a 500 team. Then, they played well against the Rams, but in the end, they didn't have what the Jets with a third-string quarterback with a terrible offensive line, without their best defender. They haven't proved anything this season. The Ravens, okay, they've surprised me, and I think they've surprised other people with how well that offense has been clicking. But come on, they played the Cardinals and the Dolphins their first 2 games, and they go to Kansas City and lose. Yeah, they made it competitive for a while. Kansas City pulled ahead by several scores and then let them back in the game as well. I'm not sold on either team here. I think Baltimore will win. I think they have the defense to pressure Mayfield, to shut down Landry and Odell. I think they have the running game to smash Cleveland. I think Lamar Jackson is going to outplay Baker Mayfield. And I think this overhyped, overrated train and criticism for Mayfield is going to keep going and going until he actually takes them to the playoffs, which won't be this year. Sorry, Taylor. I know they're your team.
I'm not a Baker Mayfield defender, but I think the play calling hasn't really done him any favors at this point. That draw on 4th and 9 against the Rams was like the worst play call I've ever seen in my entire life. So maybe he wants to get a head coach that knows what he's doing that can actually kind of make some headway in the division. But I don't see any reason to pick them here. They could easily be 0-3 if Sam Darnold didn't have mono starting in week 2. So Baltimore, like you said, made the game a little bit closer toward the end last week. It made the score look a little better than it probably should have, but I still don't see much reason to pick against them. This is another game on their schedule that I think is going to just pad their schedule without actually being that impressive of a victory. But again, nothing we've seen from Cleveland has me wanting to pick them. So it's kind of like the Chiefs, where they'll give me a reason to bet for them or bet on them when they actually show it. So still waiting on that.
I'm going to pick the Cleveland Browns to win this week, and I can tell you the reason why. I wanted to see what Rick would do when I picked the Cleveland Browns this week. Just because I know that he's going to have some kind of over-the-top reaction. Disappointed a little bit on that, but he was a little bit subdued, waiting for my logic, I think, behind it. This is realistically, though, this would be why I would take Cleveland this week. This is the last time this season that I would be willing to bet on the Browns to win a game if they don't win this week. If they don't win this week, there is not a game left on their schedule where they're going to be worth it on an odds line, on a money line, to place a wager. This is it. This is the end of it. It's either, for me, this is either they are a team that might actually do something this year, that might at least try to be like an 8-8 squad, or they're going to be 3-13, and I'm going to ignore them entirely unless they're playing a great team and lock in the other side. So for me, this is basically me going, hey, I'm going to put a little bit down on this game. I'm going to pick Cleveland. When they prove me wrong and Baltimore ends up winning this game, I'm never betting on the Browns again this year. That's basically the way I go with it. Because I do agree with Taylor, though. If they get a different head coach, because a draw play on 4th and 9 isn't something I would have ever tried in Madden. I don't know how that was supposed to work. That is that made no sense. That made no sense.
I thought it was 3rd and 9 and didn't realize it was 4th and 9. But even then, even on 3rd and 9, it's a horrible call. So
3rd and 9.
I think he thought they had Barry Sanders in the backfield or something, because that was a terrible play call. But then again, it's not like their offense was, playing great the whole game. They've had their ups and downs. I think the Rams really let Cleveland stay around that game. And the Rams coaching offensive play calling wasn't great either. They didn't do enough to get Todd Gurley involved, who's arguably their main weapon on offense. And Sean McVay has come out recently and says he needs to get Gurley more involved. So I think, although that play calling was terrible, I don't think that's what lost the game. I think the fact that Baker Mayfield is not a winner yet. He's not a proven winning quarterback in this league yet, where he can take the team down and win at the end of the game against a good team. He can do it against the Bengals or the Steelers this year because they're terrible. But come on now, against a team like the Rams, he played the Titans and got embarrassed. Like, by the end of the season, this overrated thing is going to be huge.
We'll see on that. Still a lot of football to be played this year. A lot of early season in-division games for teams in the NFC North. We've seen a few already. And this week, the Minnesota Vikings visit the Chicago Bears. The Bears can be had at -130, while the Vikes carry +110 odds. Taylor, which 2-1 team will move to 3-1 and pick up their first in-division win of the season?
I was pretty bullish on the Vikings before the season, but I'm not that impressed with what I've seen so far. Kirk Cousins hasn't looked very good at all since coming to Minnesota. I think the Bears defense is going to make him beat them, and I'm not sure that's something that bodes well for the Vikings' chances. I like Chicago at home here. Not that I'm in love with Mitchell Trubisky either, but I think their defense has performed better to this point in general, and I just don't trust Kirk Cousins right now, so I'll just take Chicago at home.
Did Kirk Cousins forget how to play quarterback? Like, this is terrible. He's making Josh Allen look like a top 10 quarterback in this league. That's how bad Cousins playing. And you know what? His counterpart, Trubisky, finally had one good game, and it comes against one of the worst teams in the league, and we're supposed to be like, oh, the Bears are back, the Bears are back. That defense forced all those turnovers, scored a touchdown, which could have won the game itself if they needed to, because Trubisky and the offense wasn't doing anything. Where did their running game go? Why do they always have to do like gadget plays instead of just letting Montgomery line up in the backfield and pummeling the defensive line with what was supposed to be a great offensive line? It's ridiculous. They outthink themselves, they outcoach themselves, and they put Trubisky in a position to succeed, and he doesn't. he is not this great quarterback that people were trying to praise him as coming into the season. Year 3 does not look good for Trubisky. He looks like he's regressed, just like Kirk Cousins. What is he, like year 8 and year 7 in this league? He looks like he's regressed. Like, how do you forget playing quarterback on such a talented team? So now this game's in Chicago. You have 2 quarterbacks that are playing below average football for that position, especially with the expectations. And like Taylor said, that Bears defense is going to force Kirk Cousins to beat him. They're going to take away the run, and they're going to put pressure on Cousins all day. Green Bay did that to him, and they made him look like he was a high school quarterback. I think Chicago will do the same thing. I think Chicago's going to win this game, but not because of Trubisky. Trubisky will do everything he can to keep the Vikings in the game. This is going to be an ugly game. It's going to be one of those black and blue games because that's what this division is known for. But come on now. You can't be excited about either team's chances right now with how poor the quarterbacks are looking.
Yeah, this is a really tough one for me to pick because I kind of second what Rick was saying about Mitch Trubisky is that I'm not really excited about him. I so much about this makes me want to be like, oh no, Minnesota with Kirk Cousins, the way he's been going, it's got to be Chicago. And then you look at Chicago's offense and you go, well, probably not, maybe not, who knows. Standard line, if you're doing a coin toss with a casino, is -110. This game is being played in Chicago. 20 points movement on a money line seems to me like that is probably just what it's worth to play at Soldier Field if you're a Bears team. This just basically looks like it's a coin toss game because -130 for a Bears team at home against +110 for any team on the road shows me that basically these two teams should be considered to be equal. I'm back and forth on this one. I like marked down Minnesota for a bit. I've leaned towards Chicago in the last couple of hours of just looking at it, but just to change it up, I'm going to go Minnesota. I don't know on this one, honestly. Both of these teams could lose. I'm going to take a tie, $1 on a tie at plus 3,000 odds if we can find it. That would be my wager on this game because they're both going to try to lose and neither will be successful at pulling it off entirely. Last one for Show Me the Money Lines as the New Orleans Saints host the Dallas Cowboys. Each of these teams enter this week leading their respective divisions. The Cowboys still undefeated at 3-0. And this Sunday Night Football game has them Cowboys favored at -135 with the Saints at +115 underdogs. Rick, will Dallas move to 4-0 after Sunday night's game in the Superdome?
This is actually a tough call here because if the Saints did not do what they just did last week in Seattle, everybody would be like, Dallas is going to go down there and win. But the Saints just did what they did. They went in there when nobody thought they would win, and they defeated Seattle. And they were up big for a while there. Like, they were smashing Seattle until they allowed Seattle to score some late scores and try and, close the gap. This week they're back at home. It's usually a place where they have the advantage. I was not impressed with what Dallas did when they were on the road versus Washington. Week 2? I was not impressed with what they did last week against Miami, like 10-6 in the third quarter. I mean, come on now. So now they're heading to play the Saints, who look like they got some mojo back. Defense is playing okay. Their offense got going with Bridgewater. I'm going to take the Saints. First of all, I hate the Cowboys, but I can recognize that they're going to be a playoff team this year. But I have to go with the Saints here. Until the Cowboys play and beat a winning team, you have to go with the Saints at home. They beat the Giants, they beat Washington, and they beat Miami. Okay? Only one win between those 3 teams. That's not an impressive resume. Yes, Prescott's look good. The offenses look good. The defenses look average. But they're playing against the worst teams in the league. Come on now. I'm taking it. I just talked myself even more into it. The Saints, no doubt about it.
Yeah, Dallas is probably the best team in that division, clearly to this point. But like you said, they haven't really played anybody. The Saints' win last week was a little bit fluky. I think they had a kick return and a defensive touchdown in the game, which kind of ran up the score a little bit and inflated the numbers. But if I were betting on this, I would still take the Saints as a home dog just because the value's there and the game is pretty much a toss-up. I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is much of a downgrade from Drew Brees at this point of their respective careers, which is part of why I wrote a couple weeks ago that the injury is not a death knell for the Saints. They can still get into the Super Bowl mix, especially once he does come back. So I think they can keep their head above water. I think they can win this game. There's no reason they can't. I don't think Dallas is some juggernaut, even though they have been, impressive in terms of final scores through the first 3 weeks. I just think that I would take the value, and the values with the Saints.
I agree with you. The Saints at home as a money line underdog is good value. The Cowboys haven't proven it to me that they are as legitimate as their record indicates. The fact that they let the Dolphins hang around a little bit last week is, the three of us just playing 3 on 11 could probably, put the Dolphins away a little earlier than they did, especially if we were in front of a home crowd. But, I'm just going to take New Orleans also on that one. And with that, let's move over to our Picking Favorites segment, where we look at the games involving our favorite teams. All three of us have made picks for all three of these games. We're going to show you those picks in a minute, but we're going to have each of us break down our personal favorite NFL team's game and pick a winner before we move on to the next. For me, that is sadly the Miami Dolphins, who are only 15.5-point underdogs at home against the 1-2 Los Angeles Chargers, who just got Melvin Gordon back. He just reported to the facility. Haven't seen yet if he's going to play or not this week. Either way, the Chargers are going to win this game. As far as the last week, I basically had said that if you want to give up 24, 25 points in that game to Dallas, if a casino would give you better odds on that on a friendlier to the casino spread to do it, the numbers I provided would have been pretty spot on as far as that goes. I think the Cowboys only put one more point than that in their win. 15.5 to me seems pretty good. I would maybe consider 16.5 at this point. I could see a 17-point number that's nice and round. It's a nice football score. But, yeah, especially if Melvin Gordon can even play 5 snaps. But either way, I know the Chargers are 1-2. The Dolphins are brutal winless right now. They're terrible. There's going to be a game where I might pick them, and it's going to be coming up relatively soon on the schedule, I do believe. I'd have to double check that, but this is not the week. The Chargers are going to win this game. I'm not picking the Dolphins, and I would still even say, again, I could see LA winning by 17, if not more in this situation. Taylor's favorite team, the Houston Texans, who are 4.5-point favorites at home against the Cam Newton-less Carolina Panthers. Taylor, break it down for us. Give us your pick for this game.
It could be the homer in me, but I think the spread looks a little bit small. The Texans are at home. Carolina's obviously down Cam Newton. Kyle Allen looked good last week. He led them to a win in Arizona, but again, it was in Arizona against the Cardinals. I'm not really ready to anoint him after that game. The Texans went into LA and beat the Chargers. Deshaun Watson got sacked just twice, which I think was huge. Obviously, if they can keep him upright, I think they have a good chance to actually make some noise this season. I don't know if that's a sign of things to come or if it was just an anomaly, but if they can, keep the Carolina defense out of the backfield, I think they can win this game. I think they can cover the spread, and I will pick them to do both.
Finally, for Rick, his favorite would be the 3-0 Buffalo Bills, who are about to come to a screeching halt as the 7-point underdogs at home against the New England Patriots. Rick, are you ready to admit that the undefeated run to open the season is coming to an end, or are the Bills going to somehow beat the Pats?
I absolutely hate the NFL schedule makers for this. They can't even let Buffalo enjoy an undefeated run for a while. We don't even get through the first month of football before we have to play the team that has basically owned us for 15 years. This is very frustrating, but it's also an opportunity as a measuring stick to see where this young team is heading. They have a lot of good pieces. They're one of only 4 teams with a top 10 defense, and I think it's a top 10 overall offense because they're 5th in the league in rushing. And so they have the ability. One thing, and I think I mentioned this to you before we filmed earlier this week, they let the Bengals back in that game, and that was a little concerning for me because they were flat out dominating in every aspect of that game: defense, offense, special teams, coaching, everything. And then it's like they just took the third quarter off and let Cincinnati come back and take the lead in late fourth quarter. Yes, Buffalo was able to get the game-winning drive, win the game, and so forth and so forth. But still, they shouldn't have even let that happen. I like the confidence they've got going from the first 3 weeks, but now they're playing the best team in football. Brady's only lost to them a couple times. Like, everything lines up to where New England's going to get another win in Buffalo. My hope is that the Bills can keep it to below 10 points if they lose, which is more likely that they will. But, we've seen miracles before. And, we lightning strikes twice sometimes. People win the Powerball lottery and become billionaires. I mean, these things do happen. So who knows? It could happen this weekend. I will say this, though. I do think Miami will get a win later this year. I think they'll beat Washington at home or Cincinnati at home. One of those two they can get late in November and December. And for what Taylor said, Houston doesn't even have a running game. Carolina's going to smash it. So I'd like to deflect from my Bills to your teams and just move on to the next segment.
Let's do that with a little give me props. We start in the NFL, where there's a posted prop bet about whether or not Antonio Brown will play in the NFL again, either this year or in 2020. The yes is available at plus 200, the no at minus 300. Taylor, will AB get back into an NFL lineup by the end of next season?
It's really tough. I could see a team talking themselves into it. If someone has an injury or someone leaves as a free agent, I think it kind of depends on how this legal case goes. Maybe if that gets settled or dismissed or something, then he becomes less toxic. Maybe a team does that. But it's not even just the legal problems, I think, that are keeping teams away. It's the fact that he's a complete lunatic, apparently. He had all that drama with the Raiders before the accusation even came out. Obviously, he signed with the Patriots before that. If you're too toxic for the Patriots, I think you're probably too toxic for everybody else too. So I would lean toward no. He's kind of gone scorched earth a little bit on Twitter over the last week or two since the Patriots cut him, I guess a week. But it's tough. The NFL doesn't really have any scruples. If a team thinks he can help them, then I think they could sign him on. But as of now, which does not mean tomorrow I'll feel the same way, I would still lean toward no.
Yeah, I flip-flopped on that too as I was writing an article about it. And it's hard because I think he's hot garbage. I'm not a fan of him as a human being at all. And I just think, like you said, toxic is an understatement. With that said, this is the NFL where they prove that talent trumps troubles. And even though you can point to the fact that the Raiders of all teams couldn't handle him, and then the Patriots couldn't keep him motivated to stay on the right track, being the defending Super Bowl champs and the best team in the league, he will get back on a team. The only question is, will it be by the end of this year or the beginning of next year? And the reason is he has way too much talent. There's nothing that has showed on-field decline. He still looks like one of the best receivers in the league. He can still do his job from the slot like nobody else. He can still perform on the field. And if that's the case, a team that's making a run for the playoffs or has a serious injury and already locked in a position in the playoffs, he would be a perfect addition to it. It all comes down to this. It's the NFL's investigation. And they're probably waiting to see what's going to happen with the civil suit and any other issues that might come up. If there's no suspension, then I think we'll hear a few teams will definitely pursue him. His agent just said either today or yesterday that there are teams still interested, but nobody's going to sign him until they know if he's going to be suspended or not by the league, first of all. Second of all, I think they also want to see some kind of actions where he takes responsibility for what he's done, because it's hard to be like, well, let's put millions of dollars into somebody who shows no accountability or responsibility for his behavior and no signs of wanting to change. I think that'll scare some people off also, unless it's a situation where he can help them win in the playoffs and get them deep towards the Super Bowl or something like that. Either way, like I just said, talent trumps trouble, and he's still a talented player. And he's going to be signed at some point, either by the end of this year or definitely by the beginning of next season.
I have to agree with Rick. I think that it's a potential value play as, what was it, 2-1, basically, plus 200. I think that he's going to find himself somewhere once assuming he's not serving jail time, assuming that there is not a felony on his record for the investigations that are going on. I don't see any reason why some team wouldn't throw a line out there and try to sign him next year, because some team is going to make that decision to go for it that they think that they can either handle him or help him or whatever. The Dolphins might do something like that. If they end up drafting a quarterback first overall, to be like, oh, we're going to give our quarterback a receiver. Because the Dolphins are the kind of team that seems to be run that like the way that they would go after an Antonio Brown to help a young quarterback. I think that there's going to be someone somewhere. Jerry Jones in Dallas might go after a guy like him, because we've seen the players that he's willing to sign that the rest of the league's not, including one who's currently an MMA fighter. So we've seen it in the past where NFL players who have gotten into significant legal troubles that everyone looks at and goes, there's no way this person is going to be let back in the league. There's no way that after a dogfighting conviction that Michael Vick will ever play football again. There's no way that after Greg Hardy does what Greg Hardy did that any NFL team would ever consider signing him. And yet they did, and pretty quickly. Once Vick was out of jail, prison, whatever it was, he signed with a team pretty quickly. Greg Hardy landed with the Dallas Cowboys very quickly. It's not Adrian Peterson, with the stuff that he ran into was it his kid, found a team very quickly. He was suspended, I think, but that was basically it. I don't think that there's a reason to think, other than if Antonio Brown wants to sign with the team, I don't think that there's any reason to think that a team, one of 32, won't sign him once this court case is dealt with, assuming that he's not in jail. That would be it.
Can get caught on tape paying for sexual services in a massage parlor and not even get punished by law, don't even get in trouble with the league, can still run his team and act like he's have an impeccable reputation, which, by the way, the only thing I even like that Brown has done in the last couple of years is calling out Rapist Burger and Robert Kraft. Both of them clear, scandalous individuals with very low morals, in my opinion. But Kraft himself, caught on tape, legit, and no issues. Come on, man. Brown will be back in the league.
I hope you enjoyed that segment from the Odds On Favorites podcast. If you did, there's plenty more where that came from. Click on the link on your screen now to be taken to the complete podcast from this week, or check out the channel to find the other individual segments. And make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel for plenty more sports and sports betting picks, tips, and how-to guides.